There we go. So we have with us Liz Blazer, maker of Betsy Bingo, Sheila Sofian from Conversation with Harris, Yurico Murakami from Talking with Amy, and Sahar, Alsawaf from Uncle Mom. Get that in? Excellent. Here, please come. You all come to this side of me. No. There we go. So here are the filmmakers. Please join me in thanking them all. I always find the panel Q&As are sort of problematic, but we'll just start with the basic question of do you each see yourself as primarily a documentary maker or an animator, or neither, or does that distinction even make sense anymore? Let's start with you.
Well, I came to it as a painter, so I still consider myself a painter more than an animator than anything else. Uncle Mine was like my first film, and I do like documentary, and at the same time it's experimental. I really like exploring with the materials and textures and so forth. So it's really a mixture of a lot of things. Like, I can't say I'm one thing, and I've done graphic design, but it's really everything that that you put together to make the film work.
I love animation, but I don't really feel as an artist totally in touch with the medium of the fantasy of animation. And I think that documentary for me was when I discovered that I could use animation to tell a story with documentary, I found a lot more meaning and purpose inside of the storytelling. So I feel like anything that I really dream about or would like to make has a real documentary grounding. So I'm a filmmaker.
I feel myself animator. My piece is kind of like a personal film, and this is a film I explored the way of storytelling using animation.
Well, my work sort of evolved into documentary animation, and I feel sort of similar to Liz. I really like working with nonfiction. I like bringing other people's stories to life, and I'm just drawn to that. So I've sort of branded myself as an animated documentarian, and all my future projects have sort of moved in that direction as well.
One thing I'm curious here is, amongst the audience, how many of you consider yourself more fans of animation versus more fans of documentary, versus just here to see some good films? But more fans of animation? Anybody? More interested in documentary? You and okay, and then here just for a good time. Everybody else. Okay, so I've just been noticing that it seems like there's more response to animated documentary work to me from the animation world, or people interested in animation overall, than from the documentary world. And do you think that's an apt?
Disagree.
Okay, please.
My film, Baxi Bingo, it went to 180 film festivals, and it did amazingly in the documentary world. And animators were like, yeah, that's a great idea, but it's kind of boring, and there's no B-roll, and they're just heads, and it's overly simple, and you weren't very ambitious and wanting to spend longer time making dance sequences. And I really found that it was the documentarians that reached out and were just so interested in the storytelling and removing the audience from their preconceptions. Like, there was a space that was created by the use of animation, like in The Next First Things, Kids Days in the Picture. You really have a different relationship with the subject matter. And I always felt like, I love animation and had worked for a long time in the commercial world of animation, and I always felt really kind of rejected by the fact that animators weren't more embracing this as an animated film. They're like, well, it's sort of just boring. Nothing moves. Eyes move, that's it. And then I just always thought it was I always felt really warm about it. That documentarians were so proud of it, and animators more than some people liked it, but were just sort of like, nah.
Do any of you please, Sheila?
Yeah, I had a similar kind of experience in that my films didn't do as well in animation festivals as they did in live action festivals. And I've often wondered why that would be. And I do think it's less about the animation than it is about really the film, the coexisting. And somehow I think that in live action festivals they've responded a little bit more strongly. So I don't know if that's everyone's experiences or not.
I think the animation world is a little bit, how do I say this? Very pure. And I think that there's like a certain way that animated films that go to festivals are supposed to feel or look. And I think that documentary as an art form is just really like kind of throw everything up and see how it lands, and that's a film. It's a lot more experimental, I think, in storytelling, where animation is more experimental in its sort of spirit. Does that make any sense?
I'll just throw this out there. I noticed that in our program there are 11 filmmakers represented in the 10 films, and 9 of the 11 are women. I'm curious whether, do you think this is a subgenre that is more largely populated by women? I mean, our next show is not 11 filmmakers and 7 are men and 4 are women. But nonetheless, I wonder if this is an observation that you all have noticed in your various festival going and so forth. Is this some sort of merging of form or an experimental film that tends to be more populated by women these days? I mean, I think overall experimental filmmaking has more women filmmakers now than men, but which is not, of course, what that used to be. So, any of you wish to have a response to that or thoughts?
So far my encounters have been pretty much, I've not noticed an emphasis on either male or female filmmakers. I've met quite a few in both areas. I'll keep more of an eye on it now. Notice a difference, but I hadn't really thought about it.
Well, perhaps it's a non-issue now, which would be quite a good statement as well. So, please, any questions yet from any of you regarding technique, subject, pursuit of the truth? Please, Jamie.
I have a question. This is mostly for Sheila and Sahar, but I think it could also be applicable to the other films. It seems like one thing that works well in terms of animated documentary is sort of a confrontation with trauma, or at least with difficult subject matter. And I was wondering if you could speak to how this form, enabled you to deal with that kind of subject matter.
You want me to start? I would agree with that. I have dealt with other difficult issues in my films. I think I've been told that the animation kind of softens the blow a little bit. It's a little easier to watch and listen to what they're saying. You're not so put off by the realism of the imagery. So that may be part of it. But I agree with that. I think that there's something about a traumatic subject that's somehow easier to take in an animated form.
Well, for me, again, my background is in painting and drawing, and a lot of my drawings are very grotesque and upfront, much more than I try to do with animation, much more raw. And with this piece, it started out with a photograph. Like I saw, like my dad got an email from his brother in Iraq, and this is what had happened, and it really touched me. And I did a painting of it years before even doing the film, and I was like, you know what, it's kind of crazy to look through his wedding photographs. And I was looking through them, and I could never imagine when I was 10, or even when I saw him last, that this would actually happen to him. And so it was kind of mixing all these things together to try and tell the story about it and give it like that darker perspective that I do have in my drawings, but it's not to the point of where my drawings are at, but you get the feeling of it. And with the child, I had a child's voice do it because I didn't want to use my voice, and I felt that it was more as my perspective as a child, and even to have the child laugh in a bit with the trauma part. I had my cousin who was 5, like I was telling her what to say, and she would just repeat it after me just once. And children, they don't understand what you're saying, or they're saying until they figure out. She was like, oh my God, the ear, is he okay? Like, she really didn't comprehend what I was telling her at all until she had to think about it, and was like, oh my god, like she felt something. So yeah, I guess.
Now, was there a conscious reason that you didn't do your animation to the same level of your paintings of grotesqueness, as you call it?
Well, it's the first thing this is my first animation attempt, and I kind of performed it as if it was like a performance, or the way I would paint in a sense, and just kind of have an experience under the camera, and like, okay, I need to make some eggs. How am I gonna make some eggs? I need like paint tubes and some bread. Okay, let me go to the cafeteria and get some bread. I need like salt and pepper. You know, like I tried to make it real for me in order for me to be able to animate, because it was my first time, and I was coming at it through a painting background, and I'm so used to like collaging and just grabbing everything that I want and just putting it on there. But the thing about animation is a lot of people don't realize it's like thousands of paintings, you know, and the thing is, when you're here at these screenings, you never get to see the actual work. Like if you had a gallery and you put up all the drawings and so forth, that's like an artwork in itself, of how messy you get, and where the paint comes from, and how things become in when you see the final piece. And so, like, I appreciate both those aspects of it in that way.
Thank you. I was kind of curious about the film. Well, first of all, I wanted to say one of the things I really liked about the film was the way that the soundtrack kind of worked against the content. You know, like you said, the idea that this child's voice, and she seems like not really, like fairly unconcerned and even laughing, sort of made it more powerful, I thought. But I wanted to ask you, like, did you use an optical printer or digital compositing? I'm just a little curious about how you, like, maybe like stamped some patterns behind the video images, or
No, everything was done by hand, but I composited on After Effects, and I did a lot of shooting just under the camera. So like the roosters, like I drew the rooster and I cut a bunch out and ripped them out and just started moving them around under there to create the animation, because again, it was new for me, it was difficult, and like I don't know how to get this across, whereas a lot of people start out already have animation experience and know how to animate, and so I was trying to tell the story through these images, and being kind of like a child trying to animate in that way, you know, and it being about a child, so it felt very much like that.
well, I guess I felt another kind of contrast that way, because the story is very like heavy, but the film visually is really beautiful,
Right.
and texturally.
Shall we discuss with the others of you, if you wanted to discuss your techniques briefly that you utilized for these films?
Cut out, watercolor, handmade, scanned, and then animated in the computer. More importantly, getting to know a bunch of sexy seniors.
It's always the key to know the right people. Yurico.
Mine is just mix of everything. I did some a little bit stop motion using like a clay animation, and did some hand drawing, also painting, and put just everything together. At that time, I didn't really. I'm just digesting what I'm trying to say with my voice. Then it's just like so much fragmented. Then I just then put everything on the wall. Then try to just make it just one whole thing. So it's a mix of everything.
The technique I used was penny on glass animation on 16 millimeter.
Another question. I was just wondering, since these were all portraits, if you were able to show the films to the film subjects, how did they respond to sort of your additions or manipulations or whatever, your artistic practice in relation to their representation?
Let's start with Yurico.
Sorry, I'm not sure if I understood
Did you-
the question.
What
Did
Amy
you ever
think?
show it to Amy, and what was her response?
Oh, she said she was really surprised. She was just curious how others could see about her, but she didn't give me any negative response. And just like now she lives in New York, and she does her own artwork. Then sometimes she shows this film to others as her part of her material. That good, yeah, that makes me happy.
Sheila?
Fortunately, Harris and his family were enthusiastic about the film. I would have been horrified if they hadn't been. And that's, of course, always a problem, a dilemma with documentary animation. I mean, you're working with other people's stories. They're generously providing their stories and sharing them with you. And so it's a huge responsibility telling their stories. So thank God, that he liked it and so did his family.
Mine, my grandfather fell in love in his 80s after my grandmother died, and it was completely magic. And then years later, when I was making this film, I wanted to make a homage to senior love and trying to create an image of seniors as just normal people that were just kind of older. And so I went on a search to find these seniors, and I got to very intimate with them before I ever filmed. And a big part of our intimacy was that this is going to be animated, say what you feel, and you don't have to worry that your grandkids are going to see this, or some sort of weird ownership. And then I made the film, and it was like, oh, but like, not showing their face would be a complete failure, but I don't have permission, and I would never do it without permission. So we had a big party, I finished the film, and I sat them down, and I'm like, okay, I swore to all of you that your face was not going to be on this. And you're going to have an anonymous vote when I'll go to the bathroom and I'll come back. And if you don't want your faces on, it's out. But I just want to ask, is it possible? Because I think it's so beautiful what you guys are saying and so not embarrassing. So, and I was like horrified. I was shaking. I was like, this was like the end of the process was that they're going to hate the film. So I showed it and I went in the bathroom and I came out, oh, it's beautiful, keep our photos. So that was, luckily, their response.
My uncle hasn't seen the film, and he still lives in Iraq, of course, with the rest of my family. And my parents saw it, who live here in the U.S., and they had no idea that I was making a film about my father's brother, and all these things. They had no idea. And once they saw it, they were like, "Oh my God, how can you say this about your aunt? She reproduces. She's stupid. Like, what is he gonna think when about his wife and all these things?" And then they were like, "Can you just take that out so that we can show it to them?" Something. They're gonna get really embarrassed because in that culture you don't say anything that's beyond like your inner self. It's just on the surface, like, and so no. But I'd love to show it to them and see what they think. But again, it's really difficult. So.
Liz, I wanted to follow up. I think I've mentioned this. Like the first time I saw your film, I was actually taken aback by having the photos at the end because it seemed to me that you were undermining the use of the animation prior to that. Like you needed the photos to valorize or prove that these were real people, and so it wasn't fully giving credence to the use of animation. And since then, I don't know, I've gotten over that. But nonetheless,
Okay.
I still think it raises that question. And in the same way that, Walter Bashir ends with the 2 minutes of newsreel footage, like it's needed to
But I did it
justify.
first.
And you did it first, exactly. So I want to have your thought about that. Is there still this ongoing issue, though, with even if this animation is approaching a documentary topic, that there still is felt a need to somehow prove it as true?
Absolutely not. And I value your opinion. I think it's great that you feel strongly either way. But for me, I felt like there was such an issue of ageism, and a feeling that people who are older are decreased, dying, less smart, less fun, less interesting, less vital. I felt like I was using animation to remove you from your preconceived notions about aging and sexuality. And I felt that it was really important to see that their teeth are yellow, that their faces are wrinkled. Because as you're watching Sunga, who's round and fluffy and sexy and fabulous, when you see her when she's older, she doesn't look as glorified, I think, as I made them. Because that's the way I see them and that's the way I wanted to present them. So for me, the photographs allow you to confront how you might have heard their voices if they weren't caricatures.
I was thinking about ending my next film with photos of the characters, and now I'm wondering if I should after your comments. But I actually think that that's kind of a good point, and that was sort of my thinking of my next film too. And that and it has so much animation. I'm sorry to barge in here.
No,
but animation has so much potential in getting to the heads of people, and you're not judging them based on their look. So in some ways, it's kind of nice to have them listen to the character first, and then maybe reveal what they look like. And so if you can't prejudge them, and maybe it questions your judging them to begin with,
And also, I just have to say, like, I had spent 10 years as a gallery artist and a painter, and then I've worked in many different mediums, and I've done much more experimental and kind of out there work. And this film was conceived as a little complete, sweet thing, and that's just the way I saw it in my head. And it was always more important for me that you walk away feeling like, seniors having a warmer feeling, or like that they're vital, or like I didn't see it that way, rather than have a more higher art feeling about it. And I think that's part of, shucks, I didn't need those pictures.
Would you have made a longer film if it were live action?
I would have loved to make this a feature. There was like 20 hours of interview and much richer storytelling.
So tell me about the shortcoming then of animation, each of you. I mean, obviously all of you rather short films, and there are subject matters here which could obviously could take on a lot more examination, a lot more angles. So are you limiting your ability to investigate the topic by working in the medium of animation?
Well, the film I'm working on now is longer, but I'm combining live action and animation. And I do sort of, in some ways, wish I could have the whole film animated, but it would take me a lifetime to animate an hour-long film. So I do think that is probably the biggest shortcoming, and at least in the techniques I use are so time-consuming that it's unrealistic to try to do a longer form, usually.
Anybody else wish to?
Money's an issue.
Of course.
And animation time. You can't not say it. It's kind of
Should, absolutely. Well, let's take a moment and talk about a film where the filmmaker's not here, which is Bob Saviston's film, where obviously he's able to churn out a lot of stuff, and he has a stable of people doing a more straightforward rotoscoping technique where you can go through a lot more. And I thought it's a problematic film for a few reasons, which is one reason why I included it. And for example, there's rotoscoping involved, and rotoscoping is where you have the image and you're tracing over it, and then you can add to it and so forth. But when there's rotoscoping that hews too closely to what actually happened, then for me a question is why animate? And there's another film which I'm not including from Australia, which is Following a Prostitute and a John and so forth. It's an interesting film, but the animation is just exactly on top of what they seem to have videoed exactly. So I never saw the point of the animation. Bob's, I think, is a bit more than that. And of course we have this very troubling connection with the subject of the film, Ryan, which he's fully, what Ryan's like now. He said Ryan was in LA now and would potentially come to the film, so Ryan likes the film. But but it's a much longer film. There's differences in the technology and so on. But does the even more fun trip work for each of you? And if so, what issues? And if not, what issues does it raise for you? Maybe take that one on.
I really like his other film, Snack and Drink. Is that the name?
Snack and Drink, which is also with Ryan.
But I know, but he disguises him more. So he's this sort of you never know what Ryan looks like, and I kind of like that about it. And I had heard somebody mention that it was a very respectful way of treating him in a way, because you're not. Maybe it's more voyeuristic to see what he looks like. I don't know. It was an interesting way to think about it because I hadn't thought about it that way. But I really like Snack and Drink a lot, because of that. This one I struggled more with. I hadn't seen it before now, so I haven't really formed my thinking.
Anybody?
Made me nauseous. I liked it better than most of the films I've seen with Bob Saviston, because I actually was interested in the character's journey and seeing things from his eyes, which is, unfortunately, in his other films I've often felt like, well, I don't know why I'm really listening to this person talk so long.
Do you think, obviously, as a stable of people doing different things with their rotoscoping and embellishing it in different ways, and how does that way of doing the animation work for any of you? Do you have a chance with that?
At first, I liked the film. But then as it started to go along, it's like I could see the actual video footage, like as if it's shot on like a low res camera, like you're moving around, and so it was kind of hard for me to appreciate the artwork in it. Like I looked beyond that and I could see kind of the skeleton of it, and then yeah, it's like you think, well, the whole thing is shot in just rotoscope in that way, and it's kind of like Walter Fisher too. There are moments in there that are interviews, and it's like you don't need to embellish it even more. And you know, I don't know, it depends. Like, you know, I'm working right now on a documentary, and it's a short, and it's about an Iraqi refugee family who lives in Jordan, and it's about the single mom and her 5 children, and I interviewed her children, what they want to be when they grow up, so they made drawings for me, and I decided that I was going to make the film all rotoscope and get rid of the live action footage because it drove me nuts because it was low res quality, and I really like collaging, and I'm like, I could do this, you know, and make it look really cool. But then I stood back and realized it took away the whole situation of it. It's like I'm embellishing their situation, and it's like they're not leading a pretty life, so why should I make the visual imagery like pop art and Warhol-ish and gorgeous, where the truth is not that, and it takes away from the truth. So then I came to the realization that I'm just going to animate their drawings instead. And it's kind of like that, you know, sometimes it's like you want to see the character, and you can, and you kind of read into his mind, but at the same time it's being taken away with, you know, and that kind of style is kind of reminds me of Richard Linklater, you know, a bit. It's not, I mean, it's one thing if it's like collage, or like the piece in the middle with the woman who was like abused in the shelter, you know, that kind of felt like rotoscoping, but at the same time it was all drawings, and I guess I really liked that more. It felt more personalized. This one felt like it depersonalized your relationship with the character in a sense because of the harsh style of it in that way. Yes, that makes sense.
Really nice films, a really couple of beautiful. And I was wondering if you learned anything from these that you took into your next projects.
Okay, well, the animation style, this was my first attempt, so this time around I actually have like characters, and my landscapes are more frigid and there's form to it. I did this without really storyboarding or planning what I wanted each part of it to be of the animation. I'm just like, I want to make a film about my uncle. He got shot. This is how he used to be when he was young, and okay, let's go for it. But this time around, I'm actually planning each scene, and I have like a layout in order to go into the film. So.
Why do you think that was important to do for this film?
Because it's about real people, and it's not my family, and it's not my perspective, and I think that it's more true to the children of what I felt like I have to bring upon what they're really trying to say in the animation in that way. So, and make it really clear, because these children, it's like a little kid saying like, I want to grow up to be a fighter pilot to kill the Americans, and it's like, I can't be wish-washy on the visual imagery in the way Uncle Mine is. It's like, I'm going to be straightforward about it, like, you know, so.
Liz?
The project I did after Backseat Bingo was called the Food Court Diaries, and I interviewed kids in the food court about different subjects, and it was really exciting because in Backseat Bingo I didn't want to distract from what they were saying, but with the kids I really wanted to use their fantasy. And you know, like when the kids say my parents like buzz around me like bees nagging, you know, I wanted to make the parents have heads that were bees, and zzz. So it was more interesting after doing this film, where I just felt like it was like just work. I knew exactly how it was supposed to look the day I started, and it looked exactly the way I wanted it to look the day it ended. So after that, it was really exciting to work on something that was using the medium of animation more, because I missed it.